Welcome back to the Health Physics Society's video series, Pursuing the Truth and Promoting Transparency regarding the historical foundations of the current radiation protection philosophy based on a linear no-threshold theory for cancer risk assessment. I'm Dr. John Cardarelli, President of the Health Physics Society. In the fourth episode, we learned that Muller's signature publication in 1927 presented no data to support his conclusions, which led to questions about whether it went through a scientific peer review process. The fifth episode reveals major challenges to the conclusions that X-rays induced gene mutations by Muller's close friend and a future Nobel Prize winner, Barbara McClintock. Were they right? If so, how did Muller respond to these challenges? Let's watch.
A peer reviewer could have said, well, you're making a claim and you have to put reservations on your claim, right? But by avoiding peer review, they put no reservations on his claim. And so one couldn't go in and say, well, you haven't overstepped your boundary. Where's the data to support this artificial transmutation of the gene? But there wasn't, that's the value of a tough peer review. And Muller didn't want to do that. And what it did was it really showed part of Muller's character to me. It showed that he was opportunistic, that he wouldn't really play by the rules, that other people had to play by the rules but not Muller, that he was willing to try to get the prize unfairly over others who had to play by the rules. And we're going to see that later on with him. And it really shows very questionable character traits that he has.
Does he continue to publish in this area?
Yes, he does. He's a monster publisher, this guy. He's a genuine performer when it comes to research and publications.
Does he ever provide an explanation of how he knows this is a gene mutation?
Yes, he does. In fact, as a result of it, he knew that he was going to get hammered, I'd have to tell you. And Altenberg told him, you have to come up with something. And so what he does is he proposes research with his department chair at the University of Texas at Austin. And because how do you prove that he didn't blow big holes in the chromosomes? Well, he had an idea, and his idea was, well, maybe if I could show that under these circumstances that you could also generate what he called reverse mutations. A reverse mutation would be that, let's say the fruit fly's eye is red, and then the mutation, a mutation in the next generation shows it to be white. So, okay, there's a mutation from red to white. If Muller said, I could take that now white fruit fly and then change it back to red, I would prove that gene hadn't been blown away, but that it had just been slightly altered, and I could alter it one way, then alter it back way. And
that would be quite magical.
and he was able to do that. He was able to do that, and he said that, it's a very extensive research. He was trying to answer that question. So he knew that he was going to get hammered on it. And so what happened was that he co-published a paper, about a 72-page paper, trying to make the proof that, see, I actually did induce gene mutation.
I'm curious how he would reverse it back. He's simply irradiating these flies. Right. Is that correct?
Yes.
So he's not specifically micro-targeting any genetic material in there. It seems, it does seem odd to me that he would be able to induce it back. Did he explain how that was working?
No, other than the fact that he was using it as an explanation that the gene wasn't blown away and destroyed, that it was changed, but it was functional, changed but functional, and he believed that that's how evolution works. So he tried to tie that into the situation. Now, he thinks that he has won the argument, and maybe he convinced himself. However, something happened along the way which is really going to be problematic for him. And that was that there was a woman who was at Cornell, whose name was Barbara McClintock. And she eventually wins a Nobel Prize on something called jumping genes, I think in 1983, with corn. And she's a great story unto herself, a great story unto herself. But back in the 1920s, she was a corn cytogeneticist. So she used different sorts of chemical staining techniques to look at the chromosomes of corn. And at that point in time, it was very difficult to have good resolution of chromosomes under a microscope. And the best resolution you could have would be when they're all condensed and ready to divide in mitosis. However, what she did was she developed a really exquisite new approaches, and she was able to improve the resolution and focus, you might say, of studying genes by well over an order of magnitude. So she could take a look at the finer structure of chromosomes under a microscope compared to really crude lookings before. And so this was picked up on by this guy Stadler, who was also a corn geneticist, and he was a big person out in Missouri, and he invited her to join the faculty out there. And he had published, he was chasing Muller, and published the radiation-induced mutation in his corn. So he wants to use Barbara's new techniques, her cytogenetic techniques. So he says, look at all these mutations I've created in these corn plants. So I want you to look at them cytogenetically. So she looks at his stuff, and then she says, I hate to tell you this, but guess what? He says, what? He says, you didn't induce any you didn't induce mutations at all. When I look under this, what you have done is you have deluded yourself into thinking you have, because you have knocked major holes in your chromosomes. You have big gaps, they recombined, and you can see traits in the next generation because the chromosomes have recombined, but there are holes and gaps. You haven't induced gene mutation at all. You have just used a molecular bazooka. That's what you've done. And he fought her back tooth and nail. I mean, they're two very bright people back and forth, and this woman held her ground. And Stadler was the boss, and she held her ground. And eventually, Stadler gave in to the correctness of her interpretation. And so then Stadler said, well, guess what? If I didn't induce gene mutation, then maybe Muller didn't as well. And I'd have to tell you that the technique for evaluating fruit fly chromosomes was about 8 years behind that of corn. So she was ahead of the field. So Muller, when he was doing his work, he could, even if he would have used the techniques at the time, it was the resolution he couldn't have told what she told Stadler. And so what happens is amazing. So he and I have letters with him then writing to other well-known people saying, this is what I found, this is what Barbara McClintock found. This is raising some important questions about my work and Muller's work and so forth.
This is Stadler.
This is Stadler, that's right. And so because he's trying to size this up. This is a big deal. I mean, because Muller has become world famous. Okay, 1927 gave his talk. By the time he got back from Europe, he was world famous. His reputation just absolutely soared. And so here it is now, 1931 in Missouri, and Stadler saying, my God, maybe Muller didn't do what he said he did. Maybe he's just blowing these big holes in these chromosomes, and he's just like all the people he criticized before. He's just knocking big holes in chromosomes, but he deluded himself into thinking that he had actually induced gene mutation. And he's using McClintock's work to prove this. And so everything came to a head the next year at Cornell University, because every 5 years, the Genetics Society had a big annual, international World Congress. And so from Berlin, they went to Cornell in 1932. And so because of their great status, Stadler and Muller were asked to give 2 of the 3 mutational plenary addresses at this big Congress. And so I just picture this scene. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of geneticists there. And Stadler decides to draw a line in the sand. And Muller is big. And he tells the audience that Muller confused an observation with a mechanism. And he did not induce gene mutation.
He came right out.
He came right out and said it. He came right out and said, it wasn't like he said it once. I've got a copy of the published paper and the proceedings, and he said it probably 17 different ways. It was so clear. And that basically led to Muller's talk became very agitated. He was disheveled. Well, it should have been a glorious day for Muller in front of all these people. Just picture this yourself, right? You have been riding this scientific glory train for 4 years. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, and then a very, very senior person who's equal to you in talent and reputation, creativity. They're the best. They are among the best. And this person is saying, and he's delivering the goods. It wasn't just his data; it was McClintock's data. But the best part of what it was that he goes and he says, I applied this to my own, and I was wrong in my science paper. And so, I mean, we have to start from scratch. We didn't induce gene mutation. And this just turns the whole field. I mean, they thought they had gene mutation altogether. They thought that the linear dose, Muller's linear proportionality rule was all based upon his thinking. And this guy Stadler is turned his world upside down. And I can tell you that this idea that I mentioned to you, this reverse mutation, well, this becomes the battleground between Muller and Stern. These are two heavyweight fighters. They're like the two chess players. They're the two bright people, and they go into a major battle in a very enlightened scientific way. It wasn't like Muller called him names and Stadler called him. Stadler was a very refined man and would never do that. Muller could play down and dirty, but Muller didn't with Stadler. They went at each other the way two scientists should. They wrote grant proposals, they did studies, they published it, and Muller's trying to prove reverse mutation. He's trying to prove that this is what he did. He really induced gene mutation, and I got all their grant proposals, and I got all the papers, and all preserved in their records, and so you could see how they're doing this, and I respect the intelligence of both and the achievements of both, but I would have to say that when you have two great chess people and one person slightly better than the other in both design and execution, ultimately that person boxes the other into a corner and captures the king. I believe that Stadler was slightly better than Muller and consistently better than Muller and had boxed Muller into a corner where his interpretation was no longer believable, viable, was not a continued, it wasn't an avenue that productive interactions or fights with Stadler, or scientific, you might say, debates, were going to be productive. Muller had to come up with something new because he was really shown by cumulative evidence over the years that his explanation was not viable. And so but Muller gets the Nobel Prize.
When does that happen?
Well, that happens probably the whole decade of the 30s, with Muller and Stadler are fighting.
So this is after Stadler has said, the research, you didn't find what you think you found.
That's basically. That's right. And they fight till the end of till Stadler dies. Stadler dies of Hodgkin's disease in 1954. And they fought all the way to the end, even after the Nobel Prize. But Muller was still trying to preserve his reputation. But by 1938 or so, it was pretty evident that Muller had to go in a different direction. And it's kind of like saying, I'm going to keep doing the same thing and expect the same result. And so Muller was smart enough after, a few failures, you might say, multiple failures, to figure out that if I'm going to get Stadler off my case on this thing, then I'm going to have to come up with a novel approach for addressing mutation, because it not only is addressing the gene mutation and his interpretation, but Stadler's work then eviscerates the whole linearity concept. And so Muller had to somehow replenish that. But in the course of Muller's life, just so that you're aware of this, that 1932, when that talk was given, was a very traumatic event for him. And at the same time, because you could just picture yourself, I would feel pretty bad if it was me. Somebody stood up and said, "Oh, your work for the last years is wrong," and so you make this little stupid mistake, right? And so it's a big mistake. And so, but at the same time, Muller was going through a terrible divorce. And then at the same time, he had associated himself with a faculty advisor to an underground Soviet academic student organization. And University of Texas at Austin was not happy about that at all. And so despite his fame and fortune, they gave him a hard time and put a lot of pressure on him. And so the Stadler expose, the divorce that was happening at home, the pressure from the academics, all led to Muller attempting to commit suicide.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, he attempted to commit suicide, and I think it was late 32. And so what happened was that thank goodness, Muller wasn't great with doses, okay, figuring out doses, good in many other ways, and he got the dose wrong for the barbiturate that he was taking. And so he took a little bit less dose than necessary to probably kill him. And so what happened one day is that he didn't show up in the lab, as was common for him at a certain time, and some faculty and students got very concerned, and they left, and they found him wandering around disheveled in one of the cornfields at the University of Texas.
How is this story preserved?
Oh, that's preserved because he wrote a suicide note. And he wrote that, and guess who he gave the suicide note to?
I cannot guess.
No, but I bet you could. It's his best friend, Altenburg. And so it is. It's preserved, and it's preserved in the record.
Altenburg letters.
No, it's preserved in the Muller letters. It's under the control of the family. I tried to get almost everything that was about Muller, but I was unable to get to take a look at the suicide note. The biography of Muller that was written by his last graduate student, Dr. Carlson, the family was kind enough to share that sensitive letter with Dr. Carlson. I, who happened to be a critic of Muller, I made a request, but my request wasn't honored, and so I can understand sensitive family considerations there. But that's the story when it comes to so the 1930s were big, but Muller was getting whacked by Stadler. He did get whacked by Stadler, but the follow-up research favored Stadler strongly, and Muller wasn't going anywhere, actually. And so Muller's as smart as Stadler, so he had to come up with something new, and he does. And he comes up with a new approach, and the approach is to direct head-to-head with, what's the best predictor of genetic risk? Is it cumulative dose, or is it dose rate? And so Muller, without going into his whole life, he finds himself at the University of Edinburgh in 1938 up to about 1940. And while there, he finds a graduate student that will test this hypothesis, and it revives his spirit and his belief, you might say, and for others to believe that he induced gene mutation, and to revitalize this LNT framework. I would like to say one other thing that happened in the 1930s was when Muller, after the near suicide and so forth, he had to get away. He just had to get away to preserve his sanity, probably, and move his career ahead. And he got a Fulbright fellowship, and he went to Berlin. And he was studying there, researching there with some really well-known radiation geneticists like himself. Got connected with some really excellent, superb physicists. And the physicists, working with himself and this other people in Germany, they developed a mechanism for Muller's dose-response relationship based upon target theory. And what they did was they were very quantitative, very mathematically modeling, and they developed a model that related target theory to his dose response, and they called it the single hit LNT model. And that's where it comes from this interaction between the physicist Muller and another radiation geneticist in Berlin. And they published their paper in 1935.
Thank you for watching the 5th episode on the historical foundations of the linear no-threshold theory, where we learned about Barbara McClintock calling into question the conclusions of Muller and Stadler. The next episode will explore the following chapter of Muller's career, where the LNT single-hit theory is first proposed. The HPS is a trusted source of radiation. We're a scientific organization, and as is offered with a scientific peer review process, viewers are encouraged to send comments or suggested corrections to factcheck@hps.org, and be sure to include your sources so that we may correct the record if necessary. If any changes are made, they will appear at the end of this episode. Please visit our Ask the Experts website to ask questions or seek answers to common radiation-related questions, and view our fact sheets. We also have official position statements that can be found at hps.org. Finally, if you wish to join the Home for Radiation Protection Professionals, please visit the link below. We welcome you.